All right, that was Lieutenant Paul Vance telling us what they want us to know at this point. We're going to bring in Peter Valentin, who's with the state police for some 10 years. You just said to me a lot of your former colleagues are on the ground now at that school.
Yes, I used to be with the Western District Major Crime Squad, and from what I understand from hearing Lieutenant Vance just now, that's the unit that's primarily responsible for investigating the scene.
What happens when you arrive at an active scene like that?
Well, I mean, the first thing to understand is that the scene can be so large that even understanding how much work needs to be done can take a considerable amount of time. And I understand that the scene, at the very least, now extends into the woods, actually beyond the school itself.
We saw K-9 units going into those woods earlier today.
Right, and so that, I mean, that creates the first problem is that, well, how far out do we go to look for evidence? And you can imagine that this, and I think Lieutenant Vance mentioned this as well, this will most likely take more than just the weekend, and this will extend into the beginning of next week, because at the end of this, we have lots of questions that we need to answer. Of course, we'll never be satisfied with what the answers actually are, but in order to address all of the questions that will come out in the days, months, and years from now, truly, we need to be as comprehensive and broad-minded as possible.
How much preparation is done with the thought that at some point in your career you could face this kind of reality as a state trooper?
Well, and you know, I did hear Lieutenant Vance mention earlier that off-duty and on-duty troopers responded to the scene, and I do remember very, very well from my time as a trooper that you always listened to the radio, and that the possibility existed that while at one moment you might be shopping or doing something, you know, rather insignificant, and then 1 minute later you could be going to a call like this, and so you always mentally prepare for that change in thought process, and you have everything you need with you.
Let me ask you this. How do you mentally prepare to go into a classroom with a lot of babies that have died in a kindergarten class?
Frankly, Ann, it's not possible. I've seen dead children, I've seen families, you know, in being a crime scene investigator, which is what I was, I've seen all sorts of things that I care not to remember. There is no inoculation for this, and so my heart goes out to my coworkers, my former coworkers, and anybody who has to deal with that, because there is no preparation, there are no words to console, and they have a lot of work to do.
What kind of forensic work do you have to start doing? And this is so fresh.
Well, part of what you need to do is understand what is it I'm looking for, right? You certainly won't find it if you don't know what you're looking for, and certainly there are things that are simple to think about. We're looking for guns, we're looking for cartridge cases and spent bullets and things like that. But now we need to think, well, who could have been there? So now we're looking for physiological fluids, we're looking for fingerprints, we're looking for places where DNA might be transferred so that we can understand who might have touched what item at what time, and then ultimately what allows us to go back years later and talk about this scene with some intelligence and knowledge is the documentation.
When you've got an active scene at a building that big, and it was a fairly expansive building with a number of different entrances, do you try to go to every entrance at the same time, or do you try to go through the front? What's the mindset in those moments? You
try to apply some of the information you've learned from witnesses. Did you know which way the person entered? And that might help you begin to triage that otherwise really enormous task. But sometimes you have to be careful to actually independently evaluate everything that you're looking at, because witnesses might have imperfect recollections of events, and so you don't want to simply rely on them. And I would imagine in the school there might be some surveillance footage that might be of some assistance in helping the detectives focus in particular areas.
I'm not sure I ever want to see that.
Me neither.
Yeah.
Is there a state law, I'm sorry, Ann,
sure,
about the security measures that you know of that all elementary schools need to adhere to? I mean, we aren't aware or have not been told how easy it was or how difficult it was for this shooter to get inside Sandy Hook Elementary School. Are there laws? What needs to be done from a security point of view?
I do know that there's some best practices, which at best are going to be very strong suggestions for how schools develop security protocols, and that means in terms of their physical security, how is the building secured during the day, and that also extends to how do you identify visitors to the school, how do you allow, you know, we'll call them strangers, but how do you allow outsiders onto the campus. And how rigidly those were adhered to, I couldn't speak to that.
One way this young man may have gotten into the school is that his mother was a teacher there.
Right.
And he may have been known, and that is frightening.
And you bring me to my next point, is that, you know, what will happen from this point forward is, unfortunately, we will become very, very mindful of the security protocols that exist, not only in schools, but in other public facilities.
But we should be mindful anyway.
We should be, but we do know that complacency is what allows things like this to happen. We become comfortable with the people that we see on a routine basis.
Because this takes away more and more of our freedoms.
Right.
When you have situations like this.
Right. And right now we'll be fine with those changes in protocol, but over time,
sure,
we'll regress.
Thank you, Peter Valentin.
My pleasure.
Appreciate
Thank you for
coming
having
in
me.
very much. Thank you so much.
All right, now we want to go back out live to Newtown, where News 8's Jackie Slater is live at where clearly there is a crime scene. Jackie, at this point, do we know a little bit more about